to Boxing Evolution TV. My name is Monica Harris and I'm joined by Steve Jack today. Steve, how are you doing?
Hi Monica, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Now Steve works with the body, the mind and the energy system in one go to create the best results. Isn't that right, Steve?
Yeah, for performance. So I guess I work with individuals for sport or for executive type performance, and we focus on those three key things: the mind, and we work with the body, and we work with the energy. And what I've noticed over time is that it's so much more effective for performance than working on any one of those on its own.
Okay, so let's break it down. So how would you go about working with somebody with these three systems, if you like?
Well, so let's start with the body, perhaps, because I guess if on the show there are a lot of people watching who are athletes, so it's a good place to start. So one of the first things we will do with the body is we look to get it into a peak performance state by obviously the training and conditioning side of nutrition. So I do a lot with the nutrition because it's such a key role in performance. Most people are really focused on trying to, certainly in sports, packing on muscle and focusing on protein powders and all that type of stuff, whereas I tend to like to focus on the health of every single cell in the body. So every cell is kind of like a mini human. Everything a cell does, a human does. So it will do respiration, excretion, it needs vitamins, it needs nutrients, it needs hydration and water. And if we can provide the optimal conditions for the fluids to be, for the cells to be bathing in their fluids, we can have optimal health. And what this means is that the performance massively increases. For example, most people and athletes, I find, tend to be quite acidic. There's two states that the fluids of the body are in. They're either going to be acidic or alkaline. You've probably heard of those before. What we want to try to do is have the body in a slightly alkaline state. However, most people and athletes I see first up are going to be quite acidic. Now what this means for performance, just looking at, say for example, cardiovascular type fitness or activity, is that when the body's acidic and the fluids are acidic, oxygen can't be picked up and taken around the cells as easily because the hemoglobin, which is what the oxygen binds to in this around the bloodstream, doesn't bind as well in the presence of acidity. So by focusing on alkalizing, which pretty much just means eating a lot more vegetables and fruits.
Lemons as well.
Lemons are good, although lemons are acidic, they're alkaline forming.
Yeah.
So a great way to start the day to get your system quite alkaline is perhaps take a teaspoon of just simple, half a teaspoon to a quarter teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate, just baking soda, pop it into a glass of filtered clean water, mix it up and squeeze half a lemon into it, and that will start your system off to be really massively alkaline.
So that's quite easy to do, and
costs 50 cents.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you've got a lot of shops that selling all these fancy goods, you know. It's a great way to burn fat, they're a great way to improve your performance and all this, but they tend to be quite expensive, and also they tend to be full of a lot of things that aren't necessarily good for the body, bulking agents, preservatives, and a lot of other things. So, you know, it is good to know that there's options out there. You can just go into your own cupboard in the house. Yeah. It's not bad for your body and it's going to do the same job.
Yeah, well, in terms of alkalising, it's a fantastic alkalising agent, and it's 50 pence. It's going to last you a long time. So it really is quite cheap. And then what that also does is when the system's alkaline, the hemoglobin will pick up a lot more oxygen. Another interesting thing I like to get my athletes on is I like to get them on the greens drinks. We've had a whole conversation around greens and starting a day with greens. Greens drinks are fantastic because a lot of greens will contain high amounts of chlorophyll. Now the interesting thing about chlorophyll is that chlorophyll is almost exactly the same molecular structure as hemoglobin. Now what that means is that as you start to take greens drinks on board, the hemoglobin obviously massively picks up the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll binds with the oxygen. So of course with more chlorophyll in the system, more oxygen gets carried around the body, and that alone has quite a big marker for performance. So it's really between your salts and your alkalizing and cutting back on the acidity that you're eating. So but the thing with nutrition is I try to get the athletes eating very clean.
Yes.
And cutting back a little bit on the red meat, depending if they're in sort of aggressive sports like say the rugby league, boxing, mixed martial arts, those types of things, I would keep a little bit of red meat in the diet. It's good for the anger and for aggression and a little bit of testosterone. So the reducing the acidity, so taking out things like dairy, gluten, which are all processed foods, and other types of acidic type foods. You can just type alkaline living or something like that into Google and you'll find a whole list of alkaline foods versus acidic foods, and try to eat 80% alkaline would be an excellent start, and I'd imagine that alone would significantly increase people's performance. Yeah.
And I like what you said about the greens as well, because that's a great way to start your day. You know, just chucking a broccoli, celery, a bit of lemon to neutralise it all, some blueberries maybe. Those nutrients in there can really make a big difference.
Absolutely. And see, most people, when they're sort of working on performance, they'll be looking at managing their calories, which is totally the wrong approach. You want to be managing your nutrients. So the body every day needs a high amount of vitamins and minerals, essential fatty acids, to be working at peak performance. So one of the common things is I see most athletes won't take enough essential fatty acids, which really is a key, and it's key for brain performance and also key for the health of the cells. So every single cell in the body has a cell membrane around it. The cell membrane is made of fat. Yeah, so you need to get enough fat into the diet to build those healthy cell membranes. If you're eating bad quality fats, those cell membranes don't become permeable.
So things like trans fats and
you've heard of trans fats, great. So they're good to avoid.
So that's things like sausages, burgers, crisps. But good fats are things like avocado,
fish, oily fish, avocado. Those are nuts, seeds. Are all good sources of fats, and I strongly recommend everyone to take a high quality fish supplement, fish oil supplement. So fish oil are phenomenal health benefits. So what happens if you don't get enough essential fatty acids in is that the messages or the hormones that go into the cell can't get through the cell wall because the cell wall is solid.
Okay.
So we want to make sure we've got permeable cell membranes so messages can get in and nutrients can get in as well, but also toxicity can get out. Because obviously the cell is excreting waste product from the cell, and what that needs to do is that needs to be eliminated from the cell. There was a very interesting study done back in the 30s by Dr. Carroll, who actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work on this matter. And you can read a little bit on the internet. Just type in immortal cell, the immortal cell experiment. But basically, he took a chicken heart cell, and the chicken heart cell was already, I think it was 12 years old when he took it out and put it into a petri dish. Now the average human cell will live for around say 6 weeks, some longer, some shorter, depending on where it is in the body, but roughly around about say 6 weeks. So he wanted to see how long he could keep this chicken cell alive for in this sort of petri dish. And so what he did, he wanted to make sure that the saline or the solution that the cell was floating in was absolutely pristine clean. So every day he would add nutrients in and clean the waste out and replace the fluid. Like
the body would do.
Like the body does, yes. Unfortunately, most people don't do it as effectively by putting the wrong stuff in. But essentially, how long do you think he kept that cell alive for?
Oh, well, I wouldn't like to guess, really. I don't know.
Give us your best guess. What have you gone?
Okay, so you're saying 6 weeks for one of our cells. And he's obviously keeping it in tip-top condition.
Tip-top condition. What's your best guess?
3 months.
3 months. Okay. 28 years.
Wow.
The only reason the cell died was because he actually didn't outlive the experiment. He died before the experiment finished, and then
really?
one of the lab technicians forgot to change the fluids, and then the cell died. So from this, they concluded that the cell is actually immortal. Cell is actually immortal. It's just the fluids that our cells bathe in which degenerate. So what happens is that if we can focus on the quality of our fluids in our cells that our cells float in, we can have really, really good quality cells. So this is why good, clean, filtered water is the number one thing. And unfortunately, say the UK tap water has around...
Well, fluoride is really bad, which a lot of people don't actually realise, because they've drummed it into people's heads over the years that fluoride is a good thing, it's going to promote healthy teeth. It actually does the opposite.
Absolutely. Fluoride is a
poison.
It's a neurobrain toxin, and is absolutely no related to health. You don't need fluoride for your toothpaste.
It actually rots your teeth, apparently.
Yes, it's just a complete have that fluoride, and fluoride is in our drinking water and tap water, which is really poor. And this contains a whole host of health, degeneration type activities that would happen.
So say if you wanted to, if you didn't want to buy bottled water, you wanted to somehow have cleaner tap water, how could you go about doing that? Is there something in place where you can...
Yes, absolutely. So depending upon your budget, the highest quality filter out there is called a reverse osmosis filter. That is the cleanest water you'll get, because it'll put oxygen back into the water as well. You can probably get a reverse osmosis filter fitted into your home for around 500 to 600 quid. So that'll be the top of the range. And then, you know, you'll just be coming down the range in the filters. So you'll be looking at just for a filtration system that's trying to clean out most of the impurities that are in the system. So you can just look at, you can even get one of those Brita type jugs. Is certainly going to be better than nothing at all.
Exactly.
And then you've got the different types of fitted filters. So good clean water is the number one thing. Getting enough alkaline eating type foods. So you want to when you're eating and training, you want to be eating foods that are going to give you life, which is why you want to have most of your carbohydrate sources from fibre, which is vegetables.
Yeah.
The great thing about that is people's blood sugar levels. So if your blood sugar levels are all over the place, high and low, what tends to happen is that if you eat too many carbohydrates at one go, say like rice or pasta, what happens is that it shores your amount of sugar up in your blood.
Yeah, so then you get a crash and you need to...
So what happens actually is that exactly what they go through a crash. So physiologically what happens, blood sugar levels go up, the body goes, whoa, Monica, you've got too much sugar floating around the bloodstream.
So I roll.
Too much sugar floating around the bloodstream, we need to do something about it. So the pancreas releases insulin. Insulin tells the body to take this excess sugar, store it in the liver, store it in the muscle cells, and convert the rest to body fat. Which is why people kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger, because the body has unlimited capacity to store fat. So for those people who are looking to manage their weight, the key thing is to manage our blood sugars, and we can do that by controlling our macronutrient ratios. What that means is our ratio of carbohydrates to proteins and fats. So, and if you eat mainly vegetables as your carbohydrate sources, that doesn't affect blood sugar levels, so that's great. And then your ratios, you want to be aiming for around about 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. And that can be as simple as adding in some Udo's oil or some olive oil cold. The best oil to cook with probably coconut oil, because it holds its integrity at high heat.
It doesn't then become
a carcinogenic type fat, like olive oil will if you cook high heat.
Once it gets past a certain temperature, it actually becomes bad for you. Now, I heard avocado oil was actually good for this. You can heat it at quite a high temperature and it won't become toxic.
Yep, so there are a number of different oils which are great for that. Avocado is another one. So yeah, so just be aware of the fats you're putting in for the good quality cell membranes. Proteins and fats buffer the speed of release of carbohydrate. So that's quite good. And when your blood sugar levels are stabilised, that's when you're starting to get into that performance zone where you're going to be clear. The last thing you want to be doing is, depending on what type of event you're going for, so obviously you start looking at the longer distance type activities or events, you may want to adjust the amount of carbohydrates you store, but generally for performance, for good concentration levels, you want to be eating around 40, 30, 30. What happens is those of you who are eating, say, lunch, or have a heavy pasta for lunch or something like that, or a jacket potato, why you get the afternoon crash is that there's something else that happens when insulin's in the system. Insulin also tells the body to take that sugar that's been stored in the liver and lock it up. Do not let any more sugar out of the liver to the bloodstream, because the brain gets its only source of fuel from the liver.
Okay.
So the brain's needing constant supply of glucose or sugar. Brain goes to the liver, asks for some sugar, can't get any. So there's no fuel for the brain, and then you start getting sleepy after lunch. And then of course you go for that sugary snack or coffee, and the whole cycle continues.
So then, exactly. Now let's talk a little bit about a 5 a day with the fruit and veg. Do you think that, because the crop rotations are happening so quickly now, the soil and the ground's actually becoming depleted of the nutrients that the vegetables and the plants are needing to get those nutrients in the fruit or vegetable. So how important is it to use a supplement along with your diet?
Great question on supplements. So supplements are critical for high performance. And I'm not meaning your protein powders or your meal replacement shakes, which are largely filled with just nonsense and rubbish. You want to be, if you do get a protein powder, get it as clean as you can. You would only probably looking to use one of those immediately in the following a workout. So you want to, within 30 minutes of your training session, you certainly want to be getting a protein source. The best way to get protein into the system is through a shake mechanism, but just make sure you're choosing one that's pretty clean. So I like to use one that doesn't contain any wheat, dairy, gluten, those types of things. You can even get green proteins, green protein drinks now, or pea protein, for example. So supplements, multivitamin. The soil, you're right, doesn't contain, for example, hardly any selenium or hardly any magnesium anymore. Most of the nutrients have all been stripped out. It's very sad what's been happening with how we've been treating the earth. But that's having obviously a consequence for the nutrients we're getting in. So even if you're eating 5 to 9 servings of fruit and vegetable daily,
still not enough.
It's not enough in terms of the nutrients. Obviously you want to be trying to eating organic food, because the organic food doesn't have the pesticide sprays and chemicals which we then put in,
Digest,
which we then take on board. So even organic food, while they will contain more nutrients, I still would recommend a high quality multivitamin each day, and an omega-3 fish oil, and like some sort of antioxidant as a minimum dose. If there are specific conditions, we may then have to go to therapeutic dose to reverse a certain issue. So let's take a look at one. Let's use stress, for example, because stress is a big one, right?
Yeah, and it has a massive effect on the body. And this we'll get on to how about the mind in a minute. But yeah, I mean, if you're stressed, it has such a negative impact on the body. It causes cancer.
Stress causes most of the diseases, and it creates inflammation in the system. Inflammation is a massive risk factor for pretty much all the major killer diseases that are out there.
So how is it? Let's go through what happens when you get stressed. So you get stressed, then what happens to the body? What is the physical effect that the stress causes to the body?
Okay, so what happens was that the adrenal glands, which just sit on top of the kidneys, respond in times of stress. Now, back in the caveman days when we were hunters and gatherers, we actually needed this so we didn't get eaten by kind of a saber-toothed tiger. You'd kind of get that immediate adrenaline hit, right? You'd have heard of stories of mothers lifting cars off babies and this type of thing, where people can have enormous sources of strength very quickly. That adrenaline is very needed. What happens is that, though, after you have that kind of scary type incident, you'd go back to the cave and sleep it off, right? And you recover and you regenerate yourself. What's happening in modern society today is that people aren't getting enough of that rest and recovery time. They're constantly on. They've got the crackberry on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're a good one for that.
Guilty.
People are going to bed too late. They're getting up early. They're starting the day with coffee. There's no breaks in the day. Everything's rush. They're getting bombarded by messages. So there's constant stimuli on the whole time. So what happens is the body doesn't get the recovery time, and the body then will start to release cortisol.
Okay.
So cortisol is quite a damaging type hormone on the system and creates a lot of damage around the cells. Also, the stomach area has a lot of cell receptors for fat in the presence of cortisol. So if people are stressed, and this is an area that they seem to carry their fat around their belly, that will be a good sign that there's too much cortisol in the system as well.
Okay.
So, in terms of how you can combat stress, obviously your lifestyle-based activities, the big one is try to get to sleep to bed by 10:30. You get there's different cycles of your sleep that you get in different repair. So, for example, the first 3 hours, the first 4 hours from 10:30 to about 2, your body's in physical repair, and then psychological repair between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
So if you're getting to bed at say 12, 1 o'clock, your body's just not getting that repair, and you're not getting the growth hormone to recover and grow your muscles as well. So if someone was stressed, get into bed on time, making sure they're getting all the supplements that we spoke about, but I would also add some therapeutic dose. I'd go high dose vitamin C. I'd be, depending on the level of the case, 6,000 to possibly 8,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C, the highest quality you can get.
Sorry, I've just got a quick question to ask you. I heard a report on the news many years ago that too much vitamin C is actually bad for your kidneys. Is this
complete bollocks?
As I thought.
You in cancer treatments, they will give patients up to 100,000 milligrams to 200,000 milligrams of vitamin C.
It's very effective for cancer, isn't it? Because it does something to the cells, doesn't it?
Yeah,
vitamin C.
Vitamin C, and it's sort of like they use it for therapeutic treatment in cancer, which is a whole other conversation we could have. But for stress levels, 6 to 8,000 I'd start off with, and that actually helps to neutralise the cortisol in the system. I'd be also looking at taking some extra B vitamins. In periods of stress, the brain takes quite a hit, and the brain needs high quality B vitamins to keep going. So you've got a multivitamin. I'd up the omega-3 dose. High dose vitamin C and vitamin B is a good starting point.
So say if you're an athlete, or you're having a sporting event coming up, whether you're boxing or you've got an MMA fight or whatever, whatever the sport, how does a lack of, or should I say, how does stress affect your system when you're training?
Sure. So obviously the body as an athlete, you know, and the athletes I work with, we really want to be focusing on creating stress for the body, because that's when the body adapts. So there's two types of stress. There's good stress and bad stress. Good stress on the body, but then you've got to have the recovery and repair. Certainly for my professional athletes, we'd be looking at getting them on a 10,000 milligram vitamin C type regime to help really enhance per day to really enhance repair. Remember, these athletes are training for elite sport. They're training twice a day. It's a huge amount of stress on the body. We'll be encouraging them to try to get, you know, afternoon naps when they can to encourage the growth hormone. So we really want to be something to focus on that in terms of the supplements change quite a little bit. So we're making sure we've got them on the greens drinks. We also get them on the reds drinks. So for those athletes that are really taking it to the right level, we want to make sure that they've got the optimum amount of nutrients in the system to get the best repair possible. Now, in terms of performance, the bad type of stress, for example, being anxious or having anxiety before a big fight, as an example. I know that many of our viewers here today are boxers or mixed martial artists and that sort of realm, and you've got a big fight coming up, and you've got nervous tension or stress. Now, what stress can do is under high levels of stress, what happens is that your attentional focus begins to go from wide and begins to narrow. So as your stress levels, your attentional focus narrows and narrows and narrows, which means you can miss key data that you need to make processing decisions, certainly on the field. So you want to make sure you manage your stress levels by getting yourself into what we call the ideal performance state.
Okay. And
what you would do is that, and the viewers can do this now as we speak, is that I want you to go back and kind of remember a time where you performed at your absolute peak. A time where you just excelled at what you're doing and you seem to flow through time. And I want you to go back to think around the time that you performed in that way. Have you got a time in mind?
Yeah, I've got a time in mind.
Awesome. So on a scale of sort of 0 to 10, I want you to, before the fight, rate your levels of arousal. How highly aroused were you going into the event?
Oh, 10.
You're really quite.
Yeah.
You're really quite pumped.
Yeah.
Great. So what you want to try to do then is is to take note of that. What we do now is that we contrast this with, I want you to go back and to think of a time where you performed really poorly.
Okay.
You were really disappointed with how you performed. Have you got a time in mind?
Yes, I do remember. There was a point where I was training, where I just had an absolute crash in my energy. It was an afternoon, and I just could not literally perform properly. I was struggling to do the warm up because I was so exhausted.
Were you training or competing?
No, I was training.
I'm looking for something you were competing in.
Okay.
So have you got time in mind for a competition you were against someone and you weren't happy with how you went?
Yeah.
Okay. So go back to before you stepped in to the event. What was your arousal levels like for that?
I was exhausted.
So this was maybe a physical issue?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you're going into events, you want to be mentally checking your, what we call a performance profile. And we want to measure you against your physical condition, mental condition, emotional condition, and energetic conditions. And we measure that across a few different things. Arousal is one. A big one is that a lot of athletes go into an event over-aroused, which means their attentional focus will narrow and they miss a lot of attentional cues. So stress is a great one for really sort of, focus, dropping down the amount of attention you'll pay attention to. So we want to try to make sure that you find your ideal performance state. If you want to be at an 8, you can go into the event and you currently notice you're around about a 5, you can develop techniques to build yourself up to an 8. If you know that I need to be an 8 is when I perform my best.
Okay.
For example, for you for a 10, if you knew that you needed to be a 10 before your event and you notice yourself only at a 5, you go through your mental checklist and say, well, I need to go through some steps now that are going to bring my arousal levels up to 10 because I know that's when I peak the best.
So you can actually do that if you know that you're not in that peak mental state. There's steps in place that you can go through and bring that peak mental state right to the...
Right, yeah, I've got a whole strategy where there's a little bit of a checklist, like a pre-performance event, where we go through a series of steps and checks to make sure that for the majority of the time we're entering into that ideal performance state. So what we do is we get into a pre-competition routine and we use the same sort of stimuli, data, preparation routines to make sure that we're going through and we're getting the person exactly where they need to be. And we use this in the form of rituals. Rituals are kind of great because they kind of, it performs a methodical way of getting yourself ready to perform. So for example, Many athletes I work with, we will use music at some point during to help them with because the music's great for emotions, right? It can either calm people down or pump them up.
Yeah.
So what we do is we create playlists. We've got pump up music, we've got calming music, we've got sort of neutral music. So if they're too highly aroused, they
you can play something neutral and bring them down a bit.
Exactly, and we've got there's breathing techniques and there's other techniques you can use to bring yourself up or bring yourself down going into the event, which of course, if you're not in the right, and you're not in the ideal performance state, you actually can do something about it, and you can actually have checks and balances in place to make sure you're entering in the right zone, in the right frame of mind.
Brilliant, that's excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the energy and how that works in conjunction with the mind and the body.
Fantastic. Well, energy is really, I think, the key element, and this is hardly ever looked at in preparation and for peak performance in any sport, let alone probably boxing and mixed martial arts and whatnot. So Albert Einstein, one of my heroes, said that the sole governing agency of the particle is the field. Now, in between you and I at the moment, Monica, is an empty space. It's teeming and alive with energy. You've probably heard of the term quantum physics before, quantum mechanics. Basically, the field between you and I is filled with these with particles and waves, which are alive with energy. In our own personal body, we have an energy field around it. We have a field which comes away from our system that has kind of different levels to it. We've got about 7 levels of human energy field. We have you heard of chakras before?
Yeah.
A chakra is kind of like a vortice of energy, and they kind of when a chakra is spinning healthily, it will spin around about 6 inches in diameter, like a funnel, into the kind of into the corresponding endocrine gland. So we have the root chakra, the first chakra, which points down towards the floor and picks up the electromagnetic frequency from the earth, which we metabolize, and that comes into the adrenal glands and will regulate the adrenal glands, which is interesting for stress, because if people aren't, have a healthy functioning first chakra, the adrenals will overfire on compensation.
Okay.
You had a question?
Yeah, so how is it important for performance to have all of these energy, the chakras in
balance?
In good working order, yeah.
So, okay, so let's take, for example, going into a fight, right? What happens in a fight if you go in aggressive or angry?
You're not focused properly.
Focus properly, excellent. So we have front chakras and we have back chakras. The front chakras are linked to our feeling centers. Our back chakras are linked to will. So we have feelings and will, and up top we have reason. Reason, will and emotion. You want to be balanced between your reason, will and emotion. If you're coming in and you're too much in the head, your front chakras are opening or overdeveloping too much, you're probably not centered in your body. So what we want to try to do is we want to make sure that we're centered. We're deep. We're in our body and we're totally there.
So how do we do that?
So there's a very simple technique that I can take you through if you like to. I call it anchoring.
Let's do it quickly because I do think we're going to run out of time.
Okay, well I'll just quickly I'll talk people through it. Basically, you can just anchor one hand here. There's these I call it the sky anchoring point is here, and then there's the earth anchoring point, and you just do a breathing meditation where you're imagining the energy coming down through a centering line through the body all the way to the earth as you're breathing out, breathing in, coming up through that line again all the way up, and then breathing back down. And this will help balance the chakras and center your energy, because if you go in angry or aggressive, your back chakras will be wide open, and your front ones will hardly be metabolizing any energy, and you're going to be sort of off center and balanced.
So it's quite important to have those all there.
Being centered, and centering is a skill you can easily acquire to go into an event. It's good to be centered, and it's good to be at the right arousal level. All those factors combined really lead to a good high performance state. Yeah, so with centering's I think very important and underexplored in high performance with athletes. And it's very powerful to get yourself into that ideal performance state, which really is the key. So you want to be clear in the mind, centered in the body, and balanced. And this means making sure that the mind isn't wandering. You're really focused. You've got the right level of arousal. Your energy centers are balanced. You've eaten well. You've slept well, and you're really in that ideal performance state. And there's a great little checklist you can go through as you're preparing for an event to make sure you're going through those stages. You can create just a pre-competition sort of checklist to make sure that you're all centered, balanced, anchored, all those types of things.
Fantastic. So say we have viewers at home that are watching this, they've enjoyed what you've been talking about, but they want to know more, how can they get in touch with you? You offer a one-to-one service, is that right?
Yeah, I work with individuals, companies, I work with groups at the same time. So depending upon how people wanted to work, they could get in touch with me through my website or just even email me direct. So my website's steve-jack.com, and you can feel free to drop me an email if you've got any questions, steve@steve-jack.com. And you can find out how you can get involved and go through some high performance techniques to get yourself ready for sport.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot of people checking out your website there. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak to you soon. You've been watching Boxing Evolution TV with me, Monica Harris, and Steve Jack.